My name is Evan Mercer, and I used to think the worst part of working night shifts at Detroit Logistics was missing dinner with my wife. Turns out, I was missing a lot more than that. Aria always said she married beneath her station. Marketing executive MBA from Northwestern, the kind of woman who uses words like synergy in casual conversation. Me? I'm the guy who makes sure your Amazon packages don't end up in Cleveland when they're supposed to go to Chicago. Not exactly the stuff of LinkedIn success stories. But here's what Aria never knew about her boring husband. Before I started moving boxes around warehouses, I spent 15 years with the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. I know how to follow money, how to spot patterns, and most importantly, how to catch people who think they're too smart to get caught. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday night in November. I was home between shifts, trying to catch some sleep before heading back to the warehouse, when our landline rang at 11:47 p.m. We still kept the old house phone because Aria insisted it made us look established to have a landline on our address forms. I heard her answer from the bathroom, her voice dropping to that whisper people use when they think walls have ears. "I can't talk long," she said. "Evan's here." That got my attention. I pressed my ear to the bedroom wall, but could only catch fragments. Something about tomorrow's presentation and making sure everything goes smoothly. The call lasted maybe 3 minutes. When Aria came back to bed, she was different. Energized. She curled up next to me with more enthusiasm than she'd shown in months. "Good news at work?" I asked. "Just some exciting developments with the Harrison account," she said, but her smile was the kind you get when you're keeping a delicious secret. The Harrison account. I'd heard that name before, but not in connection with any client. Miles Harrison was her boss, the VP who'd been fast-tracking Aria's career since he arrived from the Chicago office 6 months ago. The second call came 3 nights later. This time, I was ready. I'd picked up a digital voice recorder from Best Buy, nothing fancy, just a little device about the size of a thumb drive, the kind of thing that could easily hide behind the decorative soap dispenser Aria kept on the bathroom counter. At 12:23 a.m., our phone rang again. Aria slipped out of bed with practiced quiet, but I was already awake, watching through barely open eyes as she padded to the bathroom and closed the door. I gave her 30 seconds, then crept to the bathroom door. The recorder was already running, tucked behind that ridiculous lavender soap dispenser she'd bought to elevate the space. "I know it's risky," she was whispering, "but the promotion announcement is next week, and once that's official, we won't have to be so careful." A pause. Then, "Miles, you know what this means to me. I've worked so hard to get here, and having you believe in me, support me, it means everything." Another pause, longer this time. "The Christmas party will be perfect. Everyone will see us together. Professionally, of course, but they'll know. They'll know I've earned this position." My hands were shaking as I pressed closer to the door. Earned this position. The way she said it, with that breathless little laugh she used to reserve for me, told me everything I needed to know about how exactly she'd been earning things. "I should go," she whispered. "But Miles, thank you. For everything you've taught me. For showing me what real mentorship looks like." I was back in bed with my eyes closed when she emerged from the bathroom. She slipped under the covers and immediately moved to her side of the bed, but I could feel the satisfaction radiating off her like heat. The next morning, she was practically glowing over her coffee. "Big day today," she announced, checking her reflection in the chrome surface of our refrigerator. "Miles is presenting the quarterly results to the board, and he's asked me to handle the client retention analysis." "That's great," I said, buttering my toast with perhaps more force than necessary. "Miles seems to really value your contributions." She beamed. "He says I have natural instincts for the work, that I understand what clients really want." I bet she did. After she left for work, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop and started doing what I do best, following patterns. Aria's credit card statements, which I still had access to from our joint account, told an interesting story. Lunches at expensive restaurants on days when she'd claimed to be eating at her desk. A hotel charge from 2 weeks ago when she'd supposedly been at a client dinner that ran late. But the most interesting pattern was in her behavior. The late-night phone calls had started exactly 6 months ago. Right around the time Miles Harrison had transferred from Chicago to head up the Detroit office. I pulled up the company directory online. Miles Harrison, 47, MBA from Wharton, previously regional VP for the Chicago market. Married to Jennifer Harrison, 2 kids in high school. His LinkedIn profile was all buzzwords and corporate speak, but his photo showed the kind of guy who probably used terms like disruptive innovation without irony. The kind of guy who'd see a talented, ambitious woman like my wife and think he could offer her things her boring logistics husband never could. I spent the rest of the day planning. By the time Aria came home, flushed and excited about some breakthrough strategy session she'd had with Miles, I was ready for phase 2. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like expensive wine. "Oh, you know," I said. "Just moving things from point A to point B. Nothing as exciting as your breakthrough sessions." She laughed, that musical sound I used to love. "Well, not everyone can be in a dynamic industry like marketing. But that's okay, honey. We all contribute in our own ways." That night, I waited until she was asleep, then retrieved the voice recorder from the bathroom. The conversation I'd captured was even more damaging than I'd hoped. Her breathless gratitude, the way she talked about earning her position, the casual mention of keeping their relationship secret until after her promotion was announced. But it was the last part that really got my attention. She'd mentioned the Christmas party, how everyone would see them together, how they'd know she'd earned her position. The company Christmas party was in 3 weeks. Aria had been talking about it for months, how it was going to be her moment to shine, how Miles was planning to announce her promotion to senior marketing director during the awards ceremony. I smiled in the darkness of our bedroom, listening to my wife's peaceful breathing. She was right about one thing. The Christmas party was going to be her moment to shine. Just not in the way she expected. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of careful observation and meticulous planning. Aria was practically floating through our house, humming while she did her makeup, spending more on clothes than she had in the previous 6 months combined. "I need to look the part," she explained, modeling a dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. "Miles says presentation is everything in leadership," Miles says. Everything was Miles says these days. Miles says successful people invest in their appearance. Miles says networking is about building authentic relationships. Miles says the best leaders know how to leverage their unique strengths. I was getting a pretty clear picture of what Aria's unique strengths were and how she'd been leveraging them. My old Treasury training was coming in handy. I'd set up a simple surveillance routine. Voice recorder in the bathroom for the midnight calls, a small camera pointed at our driveway to track when she actually came home versus when she claimed to be working late, and most importantly, careful monitoring of her digital footprints. Aria had always been careless with passwords. She used the same one for everything. Our wedding anniversary plus her maiden name. It took me about 5 minutes to access her email account. What I found there was like a masterclass in workplace manipulation. Dozens of emails between Aria and Miles, ostensibly about work projects, but laden with subtext that made my stomach turn. "Aria, your insights during yesterday's strategy session were invaluable. I find our one-on-one meetings to be the most productive part of my week. Let's schedule another deep dive session for Thursday evening. M. Miles, I'm so grateful for the mentorship you've provided. I feel like I'm finally reaching my potential under your guidance. I'm excited to show you what I've learned in our next private session. A. Private sessions. Deep dive meetings. The corporate euphemisms would have been almost funny if they weren't describing my wife's affair. But the emails revealed something else. something that made this whole situation even more twisted. Aria wasn't Miles' first mentee. Buried in his sent folder were similar email chains with two other women over the past 3 years. Jessica Chen from the Chicago office, who'd been promoted to regional manager after what the emails delicately referred to as intensive leadership development. And before her, Amanda Rodriguez, who'd left the company abruptly after what Miles described in one email as a misunderstanding about the nature of professional development. I did some digging on Amanda Rodriguez. She'd filed a complaint with HR about inappropriate workplace conduct just before her departure. The complaint had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence, and she'd been offered a generous severance package in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. Jessica Chen had been transferred back to Chicago 6 months ago, right around the time Miles had been moved to Detroit. Right around the time he'd started mentoring my wife. The pattern was clear. Miles Harrison was a predator who used his position to exploit ambitious women, then move them along when he got bored or when things got complicated. And Aria was his latest victim. Except victim wasn't quite the right word. The emails made it clear that Aria was a willing participant, even an enthusiastic one. She knew exactly what kind of game she was playing. The midnight phone calls continued, and I recorded every one. They were getting bolder, more explicit about their arrangement. Aria talked about earning her position and showing gratitude for opportunities. Miles apparently had very specific ideas about how gratitude should be expressed, but it was the call from December 10th that gave me the final piece of my plan. "The awards ceremony is going to be perfect," Aria whispered into the phone. "Everyone will see that you chose me, that I'm worthy of this recognition." "Are you nervous about the speech?" Miles asked. I could hear him clearly through the phone. "A little, but you've taught me so much about commanding a room, about projecting confidence. I know I can make you proud." "You always do, Aria. That's why you're getting this promotion. You understand what it takes to succeed." "I learned from the best," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "My husband thinks I'm just naturally talented, but we know the truth, don't we? Success requires dedication, sacrifice, the willingness to do whatever it takes." Whatever it takes. There it was, in her own words. After she hung up and crept back to bed, I lay awake planning the final details of my revenge. The Christmas party was in 5 days. Aria would give her acceptance speech for the senior marketing director promotion, thanking Miles for his mentorship and guidance, and everyone in that room would hear exactly what that mentorship had entailed. I spent the next morning researching the venue. The party was being held at the Renaissance Center, in one of those ballrooms that screamed corporate success. I called the hotel's AV department, posing as an employee who needed to coordinate some last-minute technical requirements. "We're expecting about 200 guests," I told the technician. "The marketing team wants to ensure we have backup audio capabilities in case of any technical difficulties during the awards presentation." "No problem," he said. "The ballroom has a standard PA system with wireless microphone capability. If you need to patch in any external audio, you can connect through the mixing board in the control booth." "And where exactly is this control booth?" "Second floor balcony overlooking the main floor. You'll need an access card to get in, but I can arrange that if you're handling AV coordination for the event." Perfect. That afternoon, I drove to the Renaissance Center and walked through the ballroom during their afternoon setup. The control booth was exactly where the technician had described it, with a clear view of the stage where Aria would give her speech. The mixing board was more sophisticated than I'd expected, but not beyond my capabilities. During my Treasury days, we'd done plenty of surveillance operations that required audio equipment. I knew enough about sound systems to accomplish what I had in mind. I spent the evening preparing my materials. The voice recordings from Aria's midnight calls, edited together into a greatest hits compilation of her most damning statements. Her breathless gratitude for Miles's mentorship, her excitement about earning her position, Her casual dismissal of her husband as someone who just wouldn't understand the demands of a dynamic career. The final recording was 12 minutes long. 12 minutes of my wife's voice describing exactly how she'd climbed the corporate ladder. On December 14th, the day before the party, Aria spent 3 hours getting ready. Hair appointment, manicure, a final fitting for the dress she'd bought specially for the occasion. "This is it," she told me, checking her reflection one last time. "This is the moment everything changes for us, for our future." "I'm sure it will be memorable," I said. She kissed me goodbye, tasting like the expensive lipstick she'd bought for the occasion. "I love you, Evan. I know I've been distracted lately with work, but after tomorrow, things will be different. Better." After she left, I sat in our empty house and thought about the woman I'd married 8 years ago. The ambitious, driven person who'd pushed me to be better, to want more from life. When had that ambition curdled into something so calculating and cruel? Maybe it had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. Maybe I'd just been too naive to see it. But tomorrow night, everyone would see it. Tomorrow night, Aria would finally get the recognition she deserved. The Renaissance Center ballroom was everything Aria had described and more. Crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white linen, and a stage that looked like it belonged at an awards show. 200 of the company's finest, all dressed to impress and ready to celebrate another year of corporate success. I arrived early, wearing the one good suit I owned and carrying a small leather portfolio that contained everything I needed for the evening's entertainment. The access card I'd obtained from the AV department got me into the control booth without any questions. The mixing board was even more sophisticated up close, but the principles were the same as the equipment I'd used during Treasury operations. Audio input, output controls, and most importantly, the ability to override the wireless microphone system with a pre-recorded source. I connected my digital recorder to the board and ran a quick test. My voice came through the speakers clearly, then faded as I adjusted the levels back to normal. Perfect. Down in the ballroom, guests were beginning to arrive. I spotted Aria immediately, radiant in her new dress and glowing with anticipation. She was standing near the bar with Miles Harrison, who looked every inch the successful executive in his tailored tuxedo. They weren't touching, but their body language screamed intimacy. The way she leaned in when he spoke, how his hand briefly touched her lower back as they moved through the crowd. To anyone who knew what to look for, their relationship was obvious. I made my way down to the main floor, playing the role of the supportive husband. Aria introduced me to her colleagues with barely concealed impatience, clearly eager to get back to more important conversations with more important people. "Evan works in logistics," she would say, as if that explained everything about why I didn't quite belong in this glittering world of marketing executives and corporate climbers. Miles Harrison was exactly what I'd expected, smooth, confident, the kind of man who'd learned to weaponize charm. When Aria introduced us, his handshake was firm and his smile was practiced. "Aria tells me you work nights," he said. "That must be challenging for your home life." "It has its advantages," I replied. "You'd be surprised what you can accomplish when everyone else thinks you're sleeping." Something flickered in his eyes, but his smile never wavered. "Well, we certainly appreciate Aria's dedication to her career. She's been invaluable to our team." "I'm sure she has." The dinner portion of the evening dragged on through multiple courses and endless speeches about quarterly performance and strategic initiatives. Aria barely touched her food, too nervous and excited to eat. She kept checking her phone, probably reviewing the acceptance speech she'd been practicing for weeks. Finally, the moment arrived. The company president took the stage to announce the evening's awards, starting with employee recognition and building up to the big moment, the promotion announcements. "This year, we're proud to recognize several outstanding team members who have shown exceptional dedication and results," he began. "These individuals have gone above and beyond, demonstrating the kind of leadership and commitment that drives our success." I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed to find the restroom. Instead, I made my way back to the control booth, my heart pounding with anticipation. From the balcony, I had a perfect view of the stage. Aria was practically vibrating with excitement at her table, while Miles watched her with the satisfied expression of a man who was about to see his investment pay off. Our first promotion tonight goes to someone who has consistently exceeded expectations in client relations and strategic planning, the president continued. Please join me in congratulating Aria Venton, our new senior marketing director. The applause was thunderous. Aria rose from her seat like a queen, gracious and radiant, accepting congratulations from her tablemates before making her way to the stage. Miles was beaming, leading the applause with obvious pride. She took the microphone with practiced confidence, waiting for the applause to die down before beginning her prepared remarks. "Thank you so much for this incredible honor," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. "This promotion represents not just recognition of past achievements, but a commitment to future excellence." I waited, my finger hovering over the playback button on my recorder. "I want to thank everyone who has supported my journey to this moment," Aria continued. "But most especially, I want to thank my mentor, Miles Harrison, whose guidance and support have been invaluable to my professional development." She turned toward Miles's table, her smile radiant. "Miles, you've taught me so much about what it means to be a leader, about the dedication and sacrifice required to succeed at the highest levels." That was my cue. I pressed play and watched as my wife's own voice began broadcasting through the ballroom's sound system. But instead of her prepared speech, 200 corporate executives were now hearing her midnight whispers to her lover. "Miles, you know what this means to me. I've worked so hard to get here, and having you believe in me, support me, it means everything." The effect was immediate and devastating. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the speakers, then toward the stage where Aria stood frozen, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and pure horror. But the recording was just getting started. "I know it's risky, but the promotion announcement is next week, and once that's official, we won't have to be so careful." Someone gasped. I saw Miles half rise from his seat, his face pale under the ballroom lights. At other tables, people were pulling out their phones, some recording, others frantically typing messages. "Thank you for everything you've taught me, for showing me what real mentorship looks like." Aria's mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. She was pressing buttons on the microphone, trying desperately to regain control of the situation, but the wireless system was completely overridden by my recording. "My husband thinks I'm just naturally talented, but we know the truth, don't we? Success requires dedication, sacrifice, the willingness to do whatever it takes." The ballroom had erupted into chaos. People were standing, pointing, arguing among themselves. I could see the company president frantically gesturing to someone off stage, probably trying to get the AV system shut down. But the best was yet to come. I'd saved the most damaging recording for last, the conversation from just 3 nights ago, where Aria had been particularly explicit about the nature of her mentorship. "I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me, Miles, the way you've developed my potential. I know I can show you the same dedication in my new position." Miles was on his feet now, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. But security guards had appeared at the doors, probably following some corporate crisis protocol. No one was leaving until this situation was contained. Aria finally found her voice, shouting into the microphone, "This isn't real! Someone's playing a recording! This is fake!" But her own voice was still echoing through the speakers, describing in breathless detail how she'd earned her promotion through private development sessions and one-on-one mentorship. The recording finally ended, leaving the ballroom in stunned silence. Aria stood on the stage like a deer in headlights, her career and reputation destroyed in the span of 12 minutes. I made my way back down to the main floor, slipping through the crowd that was now buzzing with shocked conversations and frantic phone calls. By the time I reached Aria's table, she had fled the stage and was nowhere to be seen. The company president had retaken the microphone and was attempting damage control, announcing that the evening's festivities were concluded and asking everyone to exit in an orderly fashion. But the damage was done. 200 witnesses had heard exactly how Aria Venton had climbed the corporate ladder, and by tomorrow morning, everyone in the industry would know the story. I found Aria in the hotel lobby, slumped in a chair with her head in her hands. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears. "Ready to go home?" I asked. She looked up at me with eyes full of rage and desperation. "You did this. Somehow, you did this to me." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly. I was just as surprised as everyone else. "Don't lie to me, Evan. I know it was you." I helped her to her feet, noting how she swayed slightly. The shock was setting in. "Let's discuss this at home," I said. "I think we have a lot to talk about." The drive back to our house was silent except for Aria's occasional sobs. She stared out the passenger window like she was seeing the world for the first time, finally understanding how quickly everything could change. As we pulled into our driveway, she turned to me with a mixture of fury and desperation. "What do you want?" she asked. "Money? The house? What will it take to fix this?" I turned off the engine and looked at my wife, this woman who had betrayed everything we'd built together for the promise of a corner office and a bigger salary. "Fix this?" I said. "Aria, this is just the beginning." The next morning brought a parade of phone calls, text messages, and emails that confirmed what I'd expected. Aria's career was over, not just at her current company, but everywhere in Detroit's tight-knit marketing community. She sat at our kitchen table in the same dress from the night before, staring at her phone as message after message rolled in. Some were from colleagues expressing shock and disappointment. Others were from industry contacts quietly distancing themselves from the scandal. "Jennifer Harrison called," she said without looking up. "Miles's wife. She's filing for divorce." That was fast. She said she'd suspected for months but never had proof. She thanked me for providing the evidence she needed. Aria's laugh was bitter, hollow. "She's taking the kids and half of everything he owns." I poured myself coffee and sat across from her, studying the woman I'd been married to for 8 years. Without her professional armor, the perfect makeup, the designer clothes, the confident smile, she looked smaller somehow. Ordinary. "The company called too," she continued. "I'm suspended pending an investigation. They're reviewing all of Miles's personnel decisions from the past 2 years. What about your promotion?" She finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and furious. "What do you think, Evan? The promotion is gone. The job is gone. Everything is gone." Her phone buzzed with another message. She glanced at it, and her face crumpled. "What now?" "It's on social media. Someone recorded the whole thing last night and posted it online. It has 50,000 views already." I pulled out my own phone and found the video easily. The footage was shaky, but clear enough to see Aria on stage, frozen in horror as her own voice described her affair in explicit detail. The comment section was brutal. "This is what happens when you sleep your way to the top. Feel bad for her husband. Hope he takes her for everything. Corporate culture is so toxic. This woman destroyed her marriage for a promotion she didn't even earn." Aria was reading over my shoulder, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "I need to call a lawyer," she said. "This is defamation, harassment. There has to be something illegal about what you did." "What I did?" I set down my phone and looked at her with genuine curiosity. "What exactly do you think I did?" "Don't play dumb, Evan. You recorded my private conversations somehow. You sabotaged the sound system. You destroyed my career out of spite." I leaned back in my chair, considering my response. The truth was, I had recorded her conversations, but only the ones she'd had in our own home, using our own phone. There was nothing illegal about that. As for the sound system, well, that was just a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the right equipment. Let me ask you something, Aria. In all those private conversations you're so worried about, did you ever say anything that wasn't true? She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Did you or did you not have an affair with Miles Harrison? Did you or did you not trade intimacy for professional advancement? Did you or did you not lie to me every single day for the past 6 months? That's not the point, she snapped. What happens between a husband and wife should stay private. You had no right to humiliate me like that. You're absolutely right, I said. What happens between a husband and wife should stay private. So should what happens between a boss and an employee. But you decided to make both of those relationships public the moment you chose to pursue your career advancement through Miles Harrison's bedroom. Her phone rang, interrupting our conversation. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went pale. It's my mother. You should probably answer that. Aria's mother, Patricia, was a force of nature who'd never quite approved of her daughter marrying a blue-collar worker like me. She'd always believed Aria was destined for greater things, better things. I was curious to hear how she'd react to this particular career development. Hi, Mom, Aria said, putting the phone on speaker. Aria Michelle Venton, what in God's name is going on? Your cousin Jennifer just sent me some horrible video from the internet. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. Aria closed her eyes. It's complicated, Mom. Complicated? Complicated is choosing between 2 job offers. This is a disaster. Do you have any idea what people are saying? Mrs. Henderson from down the street called to ask if it was really you in that video. I was so embarrassed I couldn't even answer the phone. Mom, I can explain. Explain what? That you threw away your marriage and your reputation for some married man? That you made a fool of yourself in front of hundreds of people? That you've brought shame on our entire family? I had to give Patricia credit. She wasn't pulling any punches. Where is Evan in all this? Patricia continued. That poor man must be devastated. How could you do this to him? Aria looked at me across the table, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resentment. Evan is handling it in his own way. Well, I should hope so. If I were him, I'd throw you out on the street. In fact, maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Maybe some consequences will help you understand the gravity of what you've done. After Patricia hung up, we sat in silence for several minutes. Aria seemed to be processing the full scope of her situation for the first time. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you face the consequences of your choices. I mean with us, with our marriage. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the suburban street where we'd built our life together. The house we'd bought with dreams of filling it with children someday. The garden Aria had planted during our 2nd year of marriage, back when she still believed in building something lasting. I've already filed the divorce papers, I said without turning around. The silence stretched so long I thought she might have left the room. When I finally turned back, she was staring at me with a mixture of shock and calculation. You can't be serious. You filed for divorce already? When? 3 weeks ago, right after I confirmed what I already suspected about you and Miles. But we can work through this. Couples recover from affairs all the time. We can go to counseling, rebuild trust. Rebuild trust? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Aria, you didn't just have an affair. You systematically lied to me for months while planning your exit strategy. You used our marriage as a cover while you positioned yourself for a better life with someone else. That's not true. I never planned to leave you. Really? Then what was the plan? Keep Miles as your career mentor and me as your stable home life? Best of both worlds? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to sign the divorce papers without contest. You're going to take responsibility for your choices and move on with whatever's left of your life. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I'd queued up another recording, one I hadn't played at the Christmas party. This is from last Tuesday night. The conversation where you and Miles discussed his previous mentoring relationships with Jessica Chen and Amanda Rodriguez. The one where you laughed about how naive his wife was and how stupid I was for not seeing what was happening right under my nose. Her face went white. You want to fight this in court? You want to drag this out in public? I have hours of recordings, Aria. Hours of you describing in detail how you manipulated everyone around you to get what you wanted. She slumped back in her chair, finally understanding that she had no leverage left. What about the house? Our savings? The house is in my name. Thanks to the mortgage we refinanced 2 years ago, the savings account, well, that's where things get interesting. I'd spent the morning moving money around, liquidating joint accounts and consolidating everything into accounts that bore only my name. It was all perfectly legal, thanks to the financial power of attorney Aria had signed when I'd handled our taxes the previous year. You can't just take everything, she protested. Actually, I can, but I'm not completely heartless. I'll give you enough to get an apartment and start over. Consider it a severance package. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. What now? Aria asked. Miles Harrison was just fired. Terminated for cause, no severance, no references. Apparently, the board's investigation turned up some very interesting patterns in his personnel files. Aria's last hope crumbled before my eyes. Whatever future she'd imagined with Miles, whatever safety net she'd thought she had, was gone. I need to pack some things, she said quietly. Take your time. But Aria, when you leave this house, don't come back. We're done. She stood up slowly, like an old woman, and walked toward the stairs. Halfway up, she turned back. I loved you, you know. I still do. No, I said. You loved the security I provided. You loved having someone stable and predictable to come home to while you played your games. But love? Real love doesn't do what you did. After she disappeared upstairs, I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of our life together. The coffee mugs we'd bought on our honeymoon, the refrigerator covered with photos from happier times, the calendar on the wall with our anniversary circled in red ink. Tomorrow, I would start the process of erasing her from my life completely. New bank accounts, new phone numbers, new routines that didn't include accommodating her schedule or her needs. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for the woman I'd thought I married and the future we'd never have. 3 months later, I was a different man living in a different world. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed, helped along by Aria's complete lack of legal standing and her desperate desire to avoid any more public scrutiny. She'd signed every document I'd put in front of her, taken the modest settlement I'd offered, and disappeared from Detroit entirely. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio, living with her mother while she tried to rebuild her career. The marketing industry had a long memory for scandals, and the video from the Christmas party had become something of a cautionary tale that was still making rounds on professional networking sites. Miles Harrison had fared even worse. His wife had taken him for everything in the divorce. His professional reputation was destroyed, and last I'd heard, he was working at a small advertising firm in Grand Rapids for about a quarter of his previous salary. As for me, I'd discovered something unexpected in the aftermath of my marriage's destruction. I was happier alone than I'd been in years. The house felt different without Aria's constant presence, her schedules and demands and carefully orchestrated social calendar. I'd rearranged the furniture, painted the walls, and turned her former home office into a workshop where I could tinker with electronics and woodworking projects. I'd also made some changes at work. My supervisor at Detroit Logistics had been impressed by my attention to detail and problem-solving abilities after I'd helped uncover a shipping fraud scheme that had been costing the company thousands of dollars monthly. It turned out my Treasury department skills were just as valuable in the private sector. The promotion to operations manager came with a substantial raise and regular daytime hours. No more night shifts, no more missing dinner, no more accommodating a wife who saw my work schedule as a convenient excuse for her own activities. But the biggest change in my life had a name: Rebecca Martinez. I'd met her at a coffee shop near the courthouse on the day my divorce was finalized. She was a forensic accountant who'd been testifying in a fraud case, and we'd struck up a conversation while waiting in line for overpriced lattes. Rebecca was everything Aria wasn't: direct, honest, and completely unimpressed by corporate hierarchies or social climbing. She found my story about the Christmas party recording both appalling and hilarious, laughing until tears ran down her cheeks when I described Miles Harrison's face during the playback. "You're either the most devious man I've ever met or the most justified," she'd said. "Either way, I like your style." We'd been dating for 2 months now, and I was constantly amazed by how simple a relationship could be when both people were honest with each other. Rebecca said what she meant what she said, and had never once made me feel like I needed to be someone else to deserve her attention. She was also the one who'd encouraged me to make the final break from my old life. "You still have the same phone number," she'd pointed out during one of our early dates. "The same landline where your ex-wife used to take her secret calls. Don't you think it's time for a fresh start?" She was right, of course. The landline had been Aria's idea, part of her image of what a successful couple should look like. I'd kept it out of habit more than necessity, but every time it rang, I remembered those midnight conversations that had started this whole chain of events. So, on a sunny Saturday morning in March, I called the phone company and had the landline disconnected. The bathroom extension, that ridiculous second phone that Aria had insisted we needed for convenience, went straight into the donation box I was preparing for Goodwill. Rebecca helped me load the box into my truck, laughing as I tossed in other remnants of my previous life: the decorative soap dispenser that had hidden my voice recorder, several of Aria's self-help books about maximizing your potential, and a framed photo from our wedding day. "Any regrets?" Rebecca asked as we drove to the donation center. I thought about it seriously. Did I regret the way everything had played out? The public humiliation, the destroyed careers, the complete scorched earth approach I'd taken to my revenge? "No," I said finally. "The only thing I regret is not seeing who Aria really was sooner." "Well, for what it's worth, I think you handled it perfectly. She made her choices, and you made sure she faced the consequences. That's more than most people would have the courage to do." We dropped off the donations and spent the rest of the day at Eastern Market, browsing the farmers' stalls and talking about everything and nothing. Rebecca had this way of finding humor in ordinary situations, pointing out absurd details that made me see the world differently. "Look at that couple," she said, nodding toward a pair of well-dressed professionals who were arguing quietly near the flower vendors. $10 says she's upset because he forgot some important social obligation." I watched as the woman gestured emphatically while the man checked his phone with obvious irritation. 20 says she's the one who forgot, and she's trying to make it his fault. We were both wrong. As we walked past them, we caught enough of their conversation to realize they were actually arguing about whether to buy tulips or daffodils for their dinner party centerpiece. "See," Rebecca said. "Sometimes the most dramatic-looking conflicts are really about the most mundane things, and sometimes the most mundane-looking situations are hiding the real drama." It was a perfect summary of what I'd learned about my marriage to Aria. All those years of thinking we were living a normal, if somewhat boring, suburban life, while she was conducting an entirely different relationship behind closed doors. That evening, Rebecca and I were cooking dinner together in my newly reorganized kitchen when she brought up something that had been on my mind as well. "Have you heard anything from Aria lately?" "Not directly, but I did get a call from her lawyer last week." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Apparently, she's been having trouble finding work. The video from the Christmas party keeps following her around. She wanted to know if there was any way to get it removed from the internet." "And what did you tell her lawyer?" That I had nothing to do with posting the video, which is true. Someone else at the party recorded it and uploaded it. I can't control what other people do with publicly available information. Rebecca nodded approvingly. Harsh but fair. She made her bed in a very public way. The lawyer also mentioned that she's been going to therapy, trying to understand how she made such destructive choices. Apparently, she wants to apologize to me as part of her healing process. Do you want to hear her apology? I considered the question while I stirred the pasta sauce we were making. Did I want closure? Did I need to hear Aria take responsibility for what she'd done? No, I said finally. I don't need her apology, and I don't think she needs to give it to me. We both know what happened. We both know why it happened. An apology doesn't change any of that. Plus, Rebecca added with a grin, you've already moved on to better things. She was right. I had moved on, in ways I hadn't expected. The man I'd become in the aftermath of my divorce was stronger, more confident, and significantly less willing to accept other people's manipulation or dishonesty. At work, I'd implemented new protocols that had eliminated several inefficiencies and saved the company substantial money. My colleagues had started coming to me for advice on complex problems, recognizing skills I'd never had the opportunity to demonstrate while I was focused on accommodating Aria's career ambitions. In my personal life, I'd reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, men who'd never quite clicked with Aria's social aspirations, but who welcomed me back without question or judgment. And with Rebecca, I was discovering what it felt like to be with someone who actually wanted to build something together, rather than using our relationship as a stepping stone to something better. You know what the best part is? I told her as we sat down to eat. I finally understand the difference between being alone and being lonely. I was lonely for years while I was married. Now I'm alone sometimes, but I'm never lonely. Rebecca reached across the table and took my hand. Well, you're not alone right now. No, I said, squeezing her fingers. I'm definitely not alone right now. Later that evening, as we cleaned up the kitchen together, I realized that this was what I'd been missing during all those years with Aria. Partnership. The simple pleasure of working together toward common goals, of supporting each other without keeping score, of building something that made both people stronger rather than advancing one person at the other's expense. My phone buzzed with a text message, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel that familiar spike of anxiety. There were no more midnight calls to dread, no more secret conversations to uncover, no more lies to navigate. The message was from my brother Tom, asking if Rebecca and I wanted to join him and his wife for dinner next weekend. Normal plans with normal people who said what they meant and meant what they said. Everything okay? Rebecca asked, noticing my smile. Everything's perfect, I said, and for the first time in years, I actually meant it. The old landline was gone, disconnected and discarded, along with all the other remnants of my previous life. In its place, I had something infinitely more valuable, the truth and the freedom that came with it. Aria had taught me an important lesson about trust and betrayal, about the difference between love and manipulation. But Rebecca was teaching me something even more important, what it looked like when someone chose to be with you, not because of what you could provide, but because of who you actually were. As we turned off the lights and headed upstairs together, I realized that my story wasn't really about revenge at all. It was about discovery. Discovering who I really was when I stopped trying to be what someone else needed, and discovering what I actually deserved in a relationship. The midnight calls were over. The lies were exposed. The truth had set me free. And I was never going back.